I testified to give the glory to God. I came to this church and the Lord made me a promise. But before that, I tried many times to get into a university. I also tried a few times to speak to the school administrators. They will always write back to me and send me a rejection letter. My dream was always to study at a university, and in prophecy, God told me that I should be disciplined in reading the Bible, and He was going to bless me intellectually and allow me to enter that university, and also that I was going to study that career that I wanted. At that moment, I doubted, but I did what God told me to do, to read the Bible. And brothers and sisters, today, an interpreter from the university contacted me and said that I was on the list of the students who have been admitted. I remember the promise, and I'm very happy and grateful because God gave me the opportunity after insisting for so long. God fulfilled His promise, and I give the glory to Him.
Good morning, brothers and sisters. I would like to testify to glorify the name of the Lord, that the Lord in His holy prophecy, in a service of worship, the Lord spoke to me and said that He would be protecting my life and the life of my children. I was a little curious when the Lord spoke of my children, because I said to the brother who ministered the prophecy, but I only have one son. And he in his fear said, perhaps I got confused, sister. But I knew that at that time we were trying to get pregnant and have another baby. Well, as it turns out, after that prophecy, I went and I ran the test, and effectively I was pregnant. And it was like this, that the Lord in prophecy always told me that He would be taking care of this baby throughout the pregnancy, and He would be taking care of the life of this little one. Brothers and sisters, I began to have the beginnings of preeclampsia or toxemia. I had preeclampsia with my first baby, and so the doctors told me that with this pregnancy, it would be a very high-risk pregnancy. I was always very diligent with my food, and I always eat well, and I exercise and all of that. But the Lord allowed that in this pregnancy, I also would have preeclampsia. But I didn't show too many symptoms, brothers and sisters. After 28 weeks, the baby also appeared not to be growing properly, where the umbilical cord apparently was not feeding the baby properly. So I was worried, but the Lord always told me that the baby would be healthy. It was so, brothers and sisters, that after 28 weeks, my blood pressure began to rise. And after 28 weeks, they had to see me every day in the hospital. I was taking medications, and even so, my symptoms began to get worse. It was no longer the blood pressure, but now it was my liver that was not functioning properly. And little by little, it was evolving until it reached my kidneys. It was so that after 34 weeks, I had to be induced into labor. The Lord always told me that I should not be afraid, that I should trust Him. But in one way or another, the devil also was attacking me very much, and he would place bad dreams where I knew that I was leaving and that nothing would work out well. But the Lord kept telling me to trust in Him, and I had to be induced. And it was a very sudden moment. Nurses would come in and go out, and the doctor was very worried about me because he said, we can lose her at any moment. And the doctor said that my liver enzymes had elevated so much that my liver could burst, and it could be something fatal for me. So he would tell me that the baby was very premature, that the baby would have to be sent to another hospital where they had premature babies because their hospital was not equipped to have the machines to help the baby to breathe. So we asked the Lord, and the Lord told us in prophecy to be very diligent with the doctors and always to obey and pay attention to what they said. And we kept saying, do whatever you need to do. And so it was marvelous how the Lord, in less than 20 minutes, allowed for an emergency C-section to be done. And it was so that the Lord allowed so that when the baby came out, the baby was crying so loudly with his lungs. It's so much so that the doctor said this baby doesn't need to go to any other hospital because he's breathing on his own. They also said that the baby had to be fed through a tube, and it wasn't so, brothers and sisters. It was only for less than one day that the baby had to have the tube, because then he was feeding on his own. And the Lord fulfilled in this aspect his promise. I was hospitalized for 7 days, brothers and sisters, and throughout those 7 days, my liver enzymes kept elevating each day even more and more, from 150 up until the levels of 700. The doctors said that at any moment I could have a stroke, an epilepsy, or a heart attack. And we always asked the Lord to protect my life. But there came a moment when in the early hours of the morning, I began to tremble very much. I was trembling so much. And I only said to my husband that I was very, very cold. I began to have a very high fever. And immediately we called a nurse. And thereafter, they had to run some blood work. My blood work and the tests were ran every 4 to 6 hours. I no longer had veins in my hands. My hands were bursting because they were so bruised to the point where they had to remove the blood from my feet. It was a process that was very painful. And I would say to the nurses, though, do whatever you need to do, but I know that it will be okay. And every so often, the results would come back and they would say, your results are bad, your results are higher, they're worst. And they had to send me back into intensive care unit, and they had to place me on an IV to give me a magnesium drip. This is something that helps to relax the nervous system. And my room was also very dark, brothers and sisters. And there I began to feel that I was going to leave, because the enemy would attack me even more in dreams. And I began to have worse symptoms. And I would say to the Lord in my thoughts, because I said to my husband, I feel like I'm leaving. I feel like I'm leaving. And he said, pray in your thoughts and sing choruses that God is with you. And it was so, brothers and sisters, that the enemy continued to attack me. But after that day, they wouldn't allow anyone to come into my room because any stimulation would affect me, and I could become worse, and it could be fatal for me. So then a brother came into my room and he laid hands upon me. And he laid hands upon me, and it was beautiful how the Lord told me that I was not leaving, that the Lord would be guarding my life and the life of my children. And it was so, brothers and sisters, that how I left there alive. And thereafter, my liver enzymes were so much better. My blood pressure was stabilized, and they saw how my lungs were now better. They were not collapsing because they were also afraid of that. And this I testify, brothers and sisters, to glorify the name of the Lord.